Hello everybody, welcome to the course on Global Trade and Commerce. Today I am going to tell you all about China in the world economy, a little bit about China's entry into the WTO and India-China relations. So as we all know, China is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It has a GDP of nearly $14.3 trillion in the year 2019. It's one of the fastest growing economies with growth rates averaging 6% or more over the last 30 years. China spends nearly 9% of its GDP on infrastructure, and in 2013 China launched a massive initiative called the One Belt One Road Initiative, rechristened as the Belt Road Initiative. It is one of the largest infrastructure projects in the world on which China is expected to spend nearly $150 billion a year to link 68 countries along the old Silk Road with Europe. It will build ports, railways and pipelines. So, it is a massive initiative by China and it continues to grow at a very fast pace. It has come out of the pandemic, China has come out of the lockdown and its economy has kick-started and it is much ahead of the others. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the One Belt One Road initiative of China. As I told you, it's a massive initiative. It's one of the largest infrastructure projects launched by China. It's a 21st century maritime Silk Road and the One Belt, that is the land-based economic corridor, are the two important features of this Belt Road initiative. It has a participation of more than 60 countries accounting for 60% of the world's population and 40% of the world's GDP. So, you can imagine the massive scale on which China has undertaken this initiative. Now, what is the objective or aim of this initiative? Basically, it is policy coordination, intergovernmental cooperation, macroeconomic policy and communication mechanisms. The projects involves infrastructure developments and investments in different parts of Asia, Africa and Europe. It's currently the centerpiece of China's foreign policy and domestic economic strategy to establish China as a global economic superpower, and it's likely to be completed before the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China in 2049. So, as I said, the One Belt One Road initiative is a massive initiative and currently the entire focus of the Chinese economy is on completing the Belt Road initiative. Is India part of the Belt Road initiative? What are the options for India? India is certainly skeptical. As we all know, there is friction between China and India's relations on the border. There is a trust deficit and therefore, India has refused to sign the Belt Road initiative by China. And also because of the fact that the Belt Road initiative passes through the controversial Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that is a China-Pakistan economic corridor, and as a result of this, India has raised objection to the Belt Road initiative passing through the Pakistan occupied territory, and therefore, India has refused to sign the Belt Road initiative. As a response to the China's Belt Road initiative, India has launched its own project called Project Mausam and Sagarmala to counter the Chinese incursion. Now, India is a much better position as compared to countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal and Myanmar, which are kind of obligated to China and therefore forced to accept the infrastructure projects and investment that China is doing in their countries, whereas India is not in that category. So, of course, we need to have cooperation with India. Empirical results show that India-China cooperation is better than India-China competition. India has a better bargaining power as compared to its other counterparts in South Asia. In short, if you can't beat them, join them, but don't lose your strategic importance. That is the message that the Indians would like to give out to the Chinese. Another important landmark with regard to the Chinese economy is the Chinese entry into the WTO in the year 2001 and its impact on India. Now, WTO successfully completed the entry of China into the WTO in the Doha round of negotiations on the 17th of September 2001 and accepted China as the 143rd member on 11th December 2001. It was the culmination of the negotiations that began in as early as 1986. So, China negotiated for nearly 15 long years, especially with the United States, to gain an entry into the World Trade Organization. Now, if you look at the two economies, India and China, and you compare some facts, Now, India and China's GDP growth has been twice that of the global growth rate for the last 20 years. In both the countries, demographics has been a key driver of growth. Now, India is expected to grow at 7% or more in the next 10 years. China is expected to grow at more than 8% or more in the next 10 years. However, the two countries are posed with many challenges in the coming years. Now, if you look at the two countries, if you do a very quick comparison of the two countries, analysis of China and India, the economic reforms process in China started in the year 1978, whereas the economic reforms process in the year in India started in the year 1990-91. Now, what is the basic difference between the two countries? China undertook its economic reforms in 1978. They were strategy based. There was no underlying crisis in the Chinese economy when the Chinese went in for the economic reforms process. On the contrary, when India went in for the economic reforms process in the year 1991, India was in dire straits. The Indian economy was in a mess. We didn't have enough money to pay back to the multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. We had to pledge our gold. Our inflation was galloping at 17%. We had foreign exchange reserves to last only for 2 weeks of imports. Therefore, you can say that the economic reforms in India were crisis driven vis-a-vis the economic reforms in China, which were strategy based. So, this is the basic difference between the two countries when it comes to the launching of the economic reforms process in the year 1978 in China and 1990-91 in India. And the second basic difference is, of course, the fact that China is a one-party regime and India believes in a participatory multi-party democracy. Now, the average growth rate in China was 9.2% between 2000 to 2016, and the same was 7.5% in India during 2000 to 2016. Now, the fiscal deficit between the two countries, fiscal deficit in China is 2.9% of GDP in December 2017, whereas the fiscal deficit in India continues to hover around 3 to 3.5%. Even in March 2017. The share of China in world trade is about 13%, whereas the share of India in world trade is just about 3.86%. Now, the one success of the Chinese economic reforms has been its poverty. 5.7% of the population is below the poverty line in China, whereas 21% of the Indian population is still below the poverty line. The foreign exchange reserves have increased tremendously between the two countries. Foreign exchange reserves stand at 3,143 billion for China vis-a-vis India's 424 billion. Both the countries have been able to attract massive FDI. Both suffer from massive bad loans, poor infrastructure, and population, as I said, is the common factor between the two countries. The first benefit of China's entry into the WTO was a gradual reduction in tariffs over a period of time and increased access to Chinese markets for goods from other countries. Now, the two countries, India and China, are competitors in the labor intensive goods. For instance, the products in which they are competitive are garments, hosiery, leather goods, and light machinery. Now, if you look at the markets in which they compete also, they are common. Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Japan, and the United States are the common markets for both the countries. These are the 5 major export destinations for both the countries. As I told you, FDI, both the countries have been very successful in attracting FDI. India has been able to attract FDI mostly in the services sector, computer software, hardware, whereas China has been successful not only in attracting FDI in the services sector but also in the manufacturing. There has been a huge benefit to China because of its entry into the WTO. Its share in world trade has increased. In world exports has increased from 3.7% in 1995 to 13.7% in 2016. So, China's entry into the WTO has benefited the world immensely. Tariffs have come down, the policy structure is more certain, and the benefits of China's entry into the United States have been large for not only in India but also the United States and the rest of the world. It is said that there is no single trade policy initiative that has resulted in larger gains in international trade than China's entry into the World Trade Organization. Then further, China is also a land of opportunity. Around 200 transnational corporations have entered China to get the benefit of cheap labor, freedom to hire and fire, which doesn't exist in India, absence of bureaucratic interference, low taxes, flexible labor laws, low priced power. Power in India is not so cheap. world-class infrastructure, little fear from strikes, and a political system that is committed to reforms. So basically, this has made China the land of opportunities. The China success story is also dependent on the enormous Taiwanese investment that comes into China. The Chinese neighbors have been very proactive and dynamic in helping the Chinese economy grow. The non-resident Chinese community accounts for over 65% of FDI inflows and also helps resolve the problem of market access for China's exports. As I said, geographical location is the key difference between India and China. The east coast of China is rich and highly dynamic, which has countries like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Singapore, which provided capital and investment markets for Chinese exports and advanced technology, whereas the neighborhood of India is comparable to very poor countries like Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal, and very few transfers and exchange took place between India and China. And therefore, Rabindranath Tagore once remarked, the Chinese have instinctively grasped the secret of rhythm of things. This is a great gift and God alone knows the secret. I envy them this gift and wish our people could get it from them. So over the next 50 years, India versus China, both the countries are going to dominate. The growth rate of China is expected to fall. However, China will continue to grow and India is going to be the major superpower. So when you look at a new global trade order, trade policies in the West are in a flux, whereas in Asia, China and India would continue to be the engines of growth. Thank you.